Moving on to set design or scenic design, we have our key concepts. First, we're going to go over the two forms of stage scenery, methods for shifting scenery, and the responsibilities of the scenic designer. One of the first decisions made during the pre-production process, all of those meetings with the director, is deciding which form of stage scenery is going to be used. Are you going to use full or minimum stage settings? I'm going to start by describing full stage settings. Full stage sets are probably what most people think of first when they think of set design. They are usually representational in nature, meaning they're trying to create something realistic, expected on stage. It creates a set the audience quickly understands, talking about things like a room, maybe a church, a schoolhouse, a forest, etc. And it's trying to fully represent that on stage in a realistic manner, unlike just bits and pieces of it. Modern plays, or plays of the 20th, 19th, and 20th century, a lot of them were performed with a scenic design that utilized full stage settings. Here we have an example of probably the most common full stage set of certainly the 19th into the 20th, mid-20th century, and that is a room. This is a fully executed rendering, meaning it's a drawing. It's a drawing, though, that has color and detail. It's from the front view, what the audience will first see. Again, for a long time, this was the most popular form of full stage set, primarily because it was the kind of plays that were being written. You know, there was a lot of modern drama, especially, that took place in interior sets. So rooms were really popular, and as the style of realism and moving on to naturalism became more and more popular, these full stage sets became more and more realistic, more detailed. Another example of full stage sets is the wing and drop set. This is the most common historical, meaning probably from the 16th through the 19th century. I mean, we still use wing and drop, but for a long time the wing and drop set was so popular that they had cookie cutter sets. They had an exterior that would work with a lot of different plays, comedic, and interior that's very similar to the drawing here, and they did not always completely change the set from play to play. It was based on genre. Now, wing and drop. Drops come from the top. We have a fly rail system, and this is at a time when they were building theaters with this fly rail system. There are pictures later in this PowerPoint, but it's basically a pulley system. It was taken from shipbuilders, and they can raise and lower drops from above that are fastened to poles, battens, and wings mean the set pieces that are pushed in from the side, either side of the stage. In fact, stages were built at the time to even have tracks on the floor for the wings. So wing and drop is still a set we use today, and one of the reasons is because it gives a lot of floor space. You'll see the bottom picture here. That's actually a set from Into the Woods. You've seen one set from Into the Woods. Here's another. Again, wing and drop. Moving on to our second form of stage scenery, minimum stage sets. Minimum stage set is putting only what the audience really needs on stage. They're non-representational in that they're not trying to create a fully realistic setting. In fact, they suggest locations. It relies a lot more on the audience's imagination. This goes back to our introductory materials. Their imagination and their suspension of disbelief to a much greater degree than full stage settings. For example, you know when you're looking at a full stage set, a box set of a room, that's supposed to be an interior room of a home, the home of whichever characters are involved in the play. Minimum stage sets are saying, okay, so this is a room, but it could be a room for different locations. It could be slightly changed. There could be simultaneous rooms on stage. Again, it's relying on the audience to fill in the blank. And modern, more contemporary plays often take place in unusual locations or many locations, and sometimes being super creative about the use of the stage space allows you to create an environment for the play that is very versatile. Minimum stage settings became really popular and are still used probably the most today. In the mid-20th century, in fact, there's a very famous play, Death of a Salesman. The design was by a designer who was Melzinger, who was very creative, and it sort of took off from there. So here's a couple examples of minimum stage settings. These would be considered fragmentary. You're not getting the full, you're getting a fragment of a set. On the left here, this is a model of a set. A set that takes place at a home, and as you can see, you have multiple playing areas. You have an outdoor, you have an upstairs that could be a bedroom, you have a downstairs which could be a living area. It gives you fragments of that space. On the right, it's for Shakespeare's The Tempest, which takes place on an island. It starts with a big storm, a tempest. The wooden wave creates on stage a visual representation of the island atmosphere without having to be literal, sand, palm trees, anything like that. You're always reminded, oh yes, they're stranded on an island surrounded by water. And the playing area in front of this big wave can be slightly changed from scene to scene. Again, it's a fragment. It's a fragment of a stage piece that works really well. And what I really like about minimum stage settings is how often they are visually stunning and interesting to look at. And you know, that's what you want for an audience. You want to serve the needs of the script, of the characters, the environment of the play, but you also want something that's visually interesting to look at. Referring to interesting to look at, you can also have, with fragmented, very skeletal sets. The set on the left takes place in a cathedral. Obviously, this is an interesting to look at, visually stunning set that suggests the location without having to have walls or anything that's painted to look church or cathedral-like. The right, it's a play that's about the inner life of an artist. So the frames give you visual interest. It solidifies the theme, the internal life of the play. And again, it creates an atmosphere for the actors and for the director to use that's interesting to look at. technology can be a great thing. Today, projected sets, whether screens in the back, parts of projections on a more traditional type room, projected sets are becoming more and more popular. I like the use of the projections. For example, if you wanted to create an outdoor setting where you have a backdrop of a film of, say, a large field, you can have that background running. You can see the leaves of the wheat in the wind, and it creates a wonderful atmosphere. This can be very expensive, so not a lot of theaters can afford to use and utilize the full gamut of possibilities when it comes to projections. However, we have even invested in large-scale projections because in the long run, after you have made that initial investment, it can be the least expensive. And again, it can be a wonderful creative way to create an intriguing, visually interesting atmosphere. In theater, we use the term shifting scenery, meaning we're changing the scenery. I have here 5 ways of shifting scenery. However, most are used in combination with one another to create what we need on stage and to change it from one scene or location to the next. One reason we have started calling it shifting is because a lot of plays no longer use the 3-act or 5-act or act 1 scene this, scene this. So we just number what are the changes, the scene changes throughout the whole play. And we call it shift 1 through whatever. Okay, so the number 1 method for shifting scenery is manpower. Humans pick it up and move it. This is often done behind a curtain, or commonly stage hands will dress all in black and the lights will be very low, and furniture, props, scenery is all moved, like I said, through manpower. Also the use of revolves, which is like a large turntable. They're not always round. When you were watching Into the Woods, that ramp was a large revolve in the middle. It's a platform, and they can be to varying heights, and it's on wheels with casters, and it can be turned. And what's nice is sometimes I have used a revolve that had, say, a bedroom on one side. We revolved it, and on the other side there could be a wall on that revolve. There was a kitchen, so you can have different locations and different shifts involving that revolve, and usually in conjunction with a wagon. In theater, wagons are platforms on wheels. They're usually low to the ground, but they can be really high. You can have multiple wagons, multiple platforms that can be moved around on the stage. Again, this is usually in conjunction with something like a revolve, or often using the fly rail system, the flies. The next slide is going to show you fly rail system. That system, again, is a pulley system that will allow set designers to attach drops or other pieces of scenery onto poles that extend from stage left to stage right, and you can raise and lower. I mentioned this during Wing and Drop set. And of course, nowadays, as more theaters are being built with technology, you often have elevators and lifts, using hydraulics usually. Mostly nowadays, they're computerized. So you can really control the rate at which they raise, they lower, they move around. Certainly Disney theaters are extraordinary with the technology that they have incorporated into their stages. Again, we use most of this stuff all at the same time. Here's the fly-rail system, like I said, from looking from the stage floor up, from the side, the pulley system, all of that stuff. The best way to really understand how set design works is to understand the responsibilities of the scenic or set designer. Your first responsibility as a set designer is to design a set that provides a functional environment. I call this the givens. For example, we know we can use minimum stage sets or full stage sets, but if you're doing a play and your director's doing it fairly traditional, and say there's 3 doors in the room and a window that people look in and out of, you need to make sure that you have that. You need to make sure it's functional. If you have even a minimum stage set and you have platforms that the actors walk on or up and down on, you need to make sure that these are functional for the actors, not just nice to look at or interesting. I showed you the image of the set with the giant wave. If you're a director who really wants to use a giant wave, but you want your actors on that, that's going to be kind of hard. Is that a given? I mean, you've got to make some choices here. Now, when it comes to providing for artistic arrangement of items on stage, this does include actors. This is when a scenic designer has to think like a director. A good set designer, and I have an image here of a floor plan with its sketched front view of a basic box set, you'll notice that unlike most of our homes, there's 4 different entryways. Look at all the furniture that's there in the seating areas and how there's very little that's up against the walls. That's because a good set design creates patterns of movement. Patterns of movement are always best when actors have to move across, around different items and furniture on stage. You want to do your best as a set designer not to create straight lines, especially horizontal from stage right to stage left. It is boring. Boring. So again, it is your job to provide artistic arrangements, or the possibility of artistic arrangements. As a set designer is designing, they need to remember to help establish the location and time. Where does the play take place? What's the time period? Certainly if it's an interior set, you can use interior design. You can create a set that as soon as the audience looks at it, they know the time period. If you're doing a play from the 1960s that's in a kitchen and you have avocado green refrigerator and appliances, boy, most of us who are establishing that time period and location immediately. You also help establish the style. Is it realistic? Is it absurdist? Is it abstract? And the mood. Is it a comedy? Is it a drama? These are using the principles of design, such as color, line, form. If you look at the bottom image here, that certainly creates tension. It is a set with strict vertical lines. The interesting room with a coffin in the middle. You're establishing so much that helps the play be successful simply by What does it look like? What mood? What time period does it indicate? Ultimately, it is the set designer's job to make sure there are props. Properties are items that are used by actors. If you're doing a play that takes place at Thanksgiving, it is the props that are the dishes and all of the items used for that meal that are on the table, any kind of decoration, etc. Now, most set designers will assign a props master, a person whose job it is to be in charge of all of those props. And often that props master will work with the scenic designer for set decoration. Set decoration is all the stuff that you have on stage that isn't necessarily used by the actors, but it helps establish the time period, the style, etc. I mean, curtains on the window, books in the bookcase. You know, those are things that are set decoration. Nowadays, a lot of theater organizations are creating a props designer position, and that person works with the set designer on props and usually set decoration. Now, it is the responsibility of the set designer to create a set with shifts in mind. You must know how the scene changes are going to happen, and your designs and floor plans must reflect that. If you're using revolves or a drop or just a box set, all of that has to be indicated in your renderings, your drawings, ground and floor plans. All of those things, you need to create that. That is the job of the set designer. You've had several examples, if I've gone through this PowerPoint, of different sketches, full color renderings, a model. The last slide, the last image, has a to-scale floor plan for a box set that's really, really good. All of those things are the scenic designer's responsibility. They must communicate their ideas to the rest of the people who are involved in the play. Now, construction is the responsibility of the scenic designer, and depending on where you're working, the level of professionalism, how many people work at your theater, most theater productions have a technical director. Now, that might be the scenic designer, but some cases there is a technical director position, and that person is in charge of, on a daily basis, overseeing things like construction, or working to make sure lights are being hung, deadlines are being met, things are being purchased. They are in charge of all of the technical aspects of the play, and they communicate with the stage manager, who is then communicating with the director. That technical director position is crucial in the theater, and it's nice to see that that's happening more and more, even in community theaters. They're understanding the advantage of having that technical director person there. One more person to make sure all the pieces are coming together correctly and on time.